Maurice Kogan again, back with answer 13 of the 64 questions I cover in my PDF document, Questions and Answers for Exporters and Export Counselors. In this video, we'll cover international commercial terms, Incoterms, what they are, and when and how they're used. Now, this is a bit longer than my usual videos and rather technical, so I encourage you to read the script provided with the video. Incoterms are three-letter acronyms that stipulate how and where export goods are to be delivered and whether the exporter or the importer pays the transport and insurance costs to get the goods to their final destination. Incoterms are published by the International Chamber of Commerce, the ICC, and are universally used for nearly all export transactions by sea or air, including for e-commerce sales. Incoterms 2020, the latest version, has 11 possible Incoterms to choose from to fit each preferred delivery option. The 11 Incoterms follow a sequential pattern in the movement of the goods. The first four, EXW, FCA, FAS, and FOB, all apply to delivery and liability while the goods are still in the exporting country. The sequence starts with EXW at the exporter's own factory or warehouse. The next three Incoterms, known as the F group, FCA, FAS, and FOB, take the goods from the exporter's premises up to the port of exit and on board the carrier. The next four Incoterms, known as the C group, CPT, CIP, CFR, and CIF, take the goods from the exporter's country to a named place in the importer's country, typically at the port of entry. And finally, the D group, DAP, DPU, and DDP, take the goods from the foreign entry point to any named place in the country, including to the importer's door. The differences within each group are often slight, but are very important, such as whether the goods go to an airport or a port, or which party loads or unloads the cargo at a drop-off point, or which has liability and must insure the cargo, or which must clear customs and pay the import duties. To illustrate, let's say a Singapore importer and a U.S. exporter reach a deal on the export purchase price. They next need to agree on where the exporter is to deliver the goods, or conversely, where the importer is to pick up the goods. The U.S. exporter might say, pick up the goods at my U.S. factory or warehouse, that's EXW. Or instead might say, I'll deliver the goods to a U.S. port and load them on the vessel for pickup, that's FOB. Or I'll deliver and insure them to the port of Singapore, that's CIP or CIF. Or even pay the import duties and deliver them to your own Singapore factory, that's DDP. The option they choose for delivery will also determine who bears liability for any damage to the goods en route. The liable party is expected to obtain cargo insurance to cover any losses. The two parties typically agree on the applicable Incoterm in the early stage of negotiation. It is then specified in several documents leading up to a deal, such as the importer's initial request for quote, the exporter's quotation, the purchase order, and pro forma and commercial invoices. Before delving into each of the 11 Incoterms, let's first look at the typical processing and delivery costs that the Incoterms cover in each country. First, costs in the exporter's country. The cost to load the goods at the exporter's factory or warehouse. Any documentation fees for export clearance. The cost to transport the goods from the factory to the port of exit, typically by truck. Any fees at the port of exit. Cost to unload the goods alongside and then on board the vessel at the port of exit. The cost to transport the goods to the importer's country. Now, costs in the importer's country. Any fees, duties, or taxes to clear goods from customs at the port of entry. The cost to unload the goods from the vessel onto a truck or train. the cost to transport the goods to the importer's specified location, the cost to unload the goods at the importer's location. Now, let's take a closer look at each of the 11 Incoterms and the differences among them. Starting with EXW, Ex Works or Ex Warehouse. Under EXW, the exporter has little involvement, and the importer picks up the goods at the exporter's factory or warehouse. Just as in a domestic sale, the exporter has the goods packaged and ready to go. The importer is fully responsible from that point on for liability if the goods are damaged in transit and to transport them to the final foreign destination. Because the importer handles everything after pickup, EXW is a good option for exporters that don't want to deal with the documentation and logistics. However, the exporter has no control of the goods once picked up. So if control is important, EXW would not be a good option. FCA, Free Carrier Alongside. The exporter delivers the goods from its premises to alongside a carrier at a domestic port or airport. The exporter must also clear the goods for export. Once cleared, the exporter's obligation ends. The importer has responsibility to load the goods on board the carrier and to transport and insure them to the foreign destination. FAS, Free Alongside Ship. FAS is the same as FCA, except that the airport option is removed. The exporter delivers the goods alongside a vessel at a port. As also with FCA, the importer has responsibility to load the goods on the vessel and transport and insure them to the foreign destination. FOB, Free on Board. FOB is the same as FAS, except that the exporter, not the importer, must also load the goods on the vessel. The importer still has responsibility to transport and insure the goods to the foreign destination. At this FOB point, the goods are on board the vessel and ready for transport under the C group of Incoterms. CPT, Carriage Paid To. CPT starts the transport stage for delivery abroad. With CPT, the exporter has the responsibility to get the goods from the exit port to the designated foreign entry port, but not to insure them against loss. The importer is liable for any loss in transit and has responsibility to insure the goods and also for customs clearance in the importing country. CIP, Carriage and Insurance Paid To. CIP is the same as CPT, except that the exporter also pays for minimum cargo insurance against loss in transit. The importer would need to get extra insurance for any added protection. The importer remains responsible for customs clearance and delivery to anywhere beyond the port in the importing country. CFR, Cost and Freight. CFR is the same as CIP, except that the exporter does not insure the cargo. The importer is liable for any loss or damage to the goods in transit and is expected to obtain cargo insurance. The importer still has responsibility for customs clearance and any further delivery beyond the entry point. CIF, Cost Insurance Freight. CIF is also the same as CIP, except that the exporter must fully insure the cargo, not just provide minimum coverage. The importer remains responsible for customs clearance and any further delivery beyond the entry point. At this CIF point, the goods have arrived in the importer's country, awaiting any further in-country processing and transport under the D group of Incoterms. DAP, Delivered at Place. DAP starts the final stage for delivery within the importing country. With DAP, the exporter has responsibility to transport the goods from the customs area to a pre-agreed named location anywhere in the country. The exporter is not responsible for unloading the cargo or for customs clearance. The importer unloads the cargo and also pays the import duties to clear customs. DPU, Delivered at Place Unloaded. DPU is the same as DAP, except that the exporter is also responsible for unloading the goods at the named location in the country. The importer still pays the import duties to clear customs. DDP, delivered duty paid. DDP is the same as DPU with two differences. First, the importer, not the exporter, unloads the cargo. Second, the exporter, not the importer, is responsible for customs clearance and payment of any import duties. DDP gives the exporter the greatest control of the goods from beginning to end, but at a higher level of involvement, including dealing with the customs bureaucracy and paying any import duties. DDP, therefore, is probably better suited for larger exporters with in-house freight departments. Well, that's it for Incoterms. It was a mouthful. Thanks for listening. In the next video, I'll switch gears entirely from export codes and Incoterms to talk about export market research. Specifically, what kinds of market research would be most helpful to exporters and where to find it.